All right, thank you very much. Ivan K. Munyonyo there, reporting live from the old Entebbe Road, where some of the diversions are going to be effected in just hours. So if you are, of course, following NTV updates on what will be happening for the next few days, you must pay attention to traffic, because diversions can completely ruin your day. So you must understand where and at what point, what time you will be required to move. Let's now return to the studio and begin with our Kickstarter discussion, the commencement of the Non-Aligned Movement Summit, and of course the anticipation still there for the G77 plus China conference that will start immediately after NAM. I have two gentlemen in the studios who will be helping us understand the international relations dimension to this and what Uganda stands to benefit exactly from hosting, but most importantly taking on the chair of these two bodies. With me is Alex Atuhaire, international relations expert. Many thanks for making it. And he's a veteran and seasoned journalist, no doubt.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning to all the viewers out there, and thanks for having me this morning. And
also joining us is Nnanda Kizito Sseruwagi, a researcher at Development Watch Center. Many thanks for making it.
Thank you, Chris.
The much anticipated Non-Aligned Movement Summit is getting underway today, and there's a lot, as we've just had, furore, traffic disruptions. There's a lot of other people might call them inconveniences, where business persons have been put off some of the roads. But we look at the greater, brighter picture more than the inconvenience, being the Africans that we are. When it comes to these particular events, I just want to get your first overview of what this means for everyone else who is involved. If you don't mind, let me begin with Mr. Nnanda Kizito.
So for everyone that's involved, it means both us as the hosting country and our delegates and visitors that are flying in. So I will begin with Uganda. This is going to be one of the biggest events that we are hosting internationally ever since we had Chogami in 2007. And it comes at a time when the world is polarized by the West, especially the United States and its stance, for example, on Israel-Palestine, and of course what we see in Ukraine with Russia. So as a host country of such a big summit, the president of Uganda as the chair, and Uganda as the chairing country, has a big opportunity to throw its political weight and diplomatic skills to see how they represent these 120 plus the G77. There are 134 members and about 6 billion people, to put up a statement for Uganda diplomatically and for the non-aligned movement on what we think about this. We can say we think that in Israel-Palestine, we want that we have a two or one state solution, or we can mediate that conflict to see that it comes to an end, as we've done in the past and as we've fought apartheid and the like. Or on Russia-Ukraine, we can say that we prefer or we advise that Ukraine chooses to join the non-aligned movement, because there is no way that Russia is going to allow that war to end when Russia is defeated. They will make sure that they fight Ukraine to submission. So it's safer for Ukraine to choose to join the non-aligned movement and walk out of their negotiations to join NATO or even the European Union. That way they would be safer. It might not be the best position for them, but it's a more realistic position for them to survive where they stay.
Okay, interesting perspective there that has been reintroduced to my list of priorities for discussion, but no doubt that's very valid. Alex, the NAM, there has been a lot of anticipation. We've been told this is it, especially for the officials from the government ministries and departments, but there are some people who are still asking the questions. NAM, what is NAM?
Okay, so thanks, Chris. As Mr. Nnanda rightly pointed out, this is this is the biggest international conference that Uganda has hosted. in the last 15 years. And that's the big one, was CHOGM 207. Now, there is a lot of benefits in hosting a conference or a meeting like NAM. First of all, you have to invest in infrastructure to be able to host this kind of meeting, and investment in infrastructure spurs other opportunities, economic opportunities. So there's a direct benefit to society, the Ugandan society, for hosting such a meeting. Number two, remember that 55% of the world population, 8 billion people, are members of an unaligned movement. So there are linkages that can be extracted from, first of all, chairing this kind of movement or hosting this kind of movement in terms of opportunities that Uganda, the region, can get from this kind of association. Then number three, there is a direct benefit of the tourism that comes with hosting this kind of meeting. There are so many visitors, more than 70, about 70 heads of state. They come with the delegations. There is a direct benefit of tourism. But beyond that, we can use this to maybe improve our tourism numbers in the next few years. So there are lots of benefits. But of course, the benefit from this, you need to be well organized. We need to do an assessment. Uganda as a society, as are we well organized? Are we well united to benefit from this kind of opportunities? Yeah. So
okay, that's very telling. But I would love you to throw a little bit more light on the unity aspect. There are already other frameworks that are available that provide Africans and African countries an opportunity to speak as a single bloc, especially when it comes to trade with the West. It could be the European Union or the United States. Now there is another addition. Apart from being just an addition, what particular leverage does it represent that has not been achieved, or something that will offer a new tactic or a new tool in pursuance of either foreign policy or trade benefits that comes with this particular chairmanship of NAM and then the G77 plus China?
I think it is important that our representatives, the people who will be on the negotiating tables, they look at some of, for example, the trade benefits that we can get from the other day. I think we were delisted from AGOA. So this now presents an opportunity for us to catch up on that.
Tell the United States we have options.
Because to tell them that we have options. But you have to be very well organized. You have to look at the opportunities, and you have to put up your best representation, your best people who can think through those. What kind of trade benefits can we get from the Nnanda, apart from the world politics of conflict? I have seen most of the topics that will come up will be that, but do we have even the capacity to influence the direction of issues like the conflict in Israel, the conflict in Ukraine? So we need to see how we can benefit from this big market.
Okay.
And then we need also to assess ourselves, what can we sell to, what are we able to sell, by the way, what are we able to sell? Apart from tourism, our biggest other capacities should be from agricultural produce, agricultural products. Are we able to sell our coffee, for example, or on the international stage? Leave alone the other international relations issues that come with this kind of meeting. meeting?
All right. Of course, there are many aspects: the political, the economic, the social, and then, of course, the direct business link. But let me return to Mr. Nnanda and request that for the uninitiated in the dynamics of global politics and diplomacy, many might struggle to understand what the NAM initiative came from, the conceptualization of NAM. At the time, 1961, what were the competing issues across the globe? What has changed? Has that framework shifted to the extent that our place in either being seen to side with one side, which is either Russia or the West, is it still necessary to be seen to be on one side in a global economy that is very, very fluid and many things overlap? Should we really be looking at, I want to be seen not to be anywhere, or even to be slightly either aligned or seeming to align with anyone?
So first, from the first question you made, this is how NAM comes to arrive in 1961 in Belgrade, Yugoslavia. You have the Second World War that ends, and the United States and Russia, or at that time the Soviet Union, are the two global powers that contribute much effort in defeating Nazi Germany and winning this war. And the two of them, the United States is capitalistic, and it has neoliberal democratic principles and value that it wants to pursue and sell around the world. And Russia is communist, and it has a socialist bloc. They had that Warsaw Pact that they signed with a few countries. So then you have the Vietnamese, the Korean War that happens in 1950 to 1953, which ideally should have been between North Korea and South Korea, but it ended up being a war between America and its allies fighting for South Korea, and the Soviet Union and China
waiting for the North,
fighting for North Korea. So when the leaders that started the non-aligned movement first met at the Bandung conference, they were realizing that if they get drawn into the conflicts of global power politics, they cannot afford to survive, because you're going to fight wars that don't belong to you. So they decided, let us make an unaligned movement and try to challenge this bipolar power structure that we have, and establish what they call multilateral dealings with each other, so that on the global stage they come with a voice that represents them as developing countries that have just come out of colonialism to represent themselves. And what you said about the world now being fluid with trade and everything, I think that the non-aligned movement still has a challenge to make sure that their ideals that were articulated in the new international economic order that they want to establish comes through, because the world trade is not fluid. It is skewed to represent the global north. That if you're dealing in the current financial system and trade system that was established under the Bretton Woods institutions that America designed after World War II, you're playing on values, on principles, and on a pitch that favors the North. So as the South, as the non-aligned movement members, we still have the need to make sure that we don't just fight for trading with each other, but we fight to make sure that we have institutions that are democratic at the international scene, that we democratize the UN, we call for its reform, we call for reform of the organizations like International Monetary Fund and World Bank, and such organizations that dictate our structure economic conditions when we have barely a say there. So I think part of the need now is to make sure that we don't just put out a document after this conference.
A declaration, like many of the conferences do.
But that, you see, there was a time in 1979 when Castro held the NAM conference in Havana and made a declaration that even if you try to read about non-aligned movement, it stands out. I think we have that chance now. We are not going to be remembered for painting the streets, for mopping the roads, as I saw in the morning. You get it. These things are not going to be remembered. They are good for aesthetics currently, but in the long term, this is a big opportunity for Uganda to do something on the global stage.
Okay. Alex,
Yes.
what specifically can Uganda do? There is pushing the tourism and trade agenda. We do we have, I must be asking, a foreign policy? Something that any government, even if it were the NUP or DP to come into government or somebody to take over, that foreign policy would be swift, and that the NAM chairmanship offers us an opportunity to push further? What are our foreign policy strategic objectives?
In terms of the Nnanda movement and Uganda is just a chair, so the Ugandan foreign policy can only feed into the structures of NAM to take a position as NAM in terms of the Global South. But having said that, I think there's an opportunity for the Global South to take a position on key issues that are happening in the world.
Oh, okay.
Of course, Uganda is chairing this, so Uganda should be at the forefront. And the key issues that are happening in the world are the trade arrangements between the Global North and the Global South.
Yeah.
Of course, as Mr. Nnanda Kizito has pointed out, this has been skewed for a long time in favor of the Global North. Then number two is to take a position, the Ugandan position on the conflict in Ukraine.
Uganda has always been...
It is neutral.
Uganda has always supported the two-state solution. Not so?
No, it's a neutral position.
Neutral?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The one in... I've seen, of course, there are proponents in Ugandan public administration that have tried to take drastic positions. Yeah. They are powerful people, and they have tried to take, and of course there is aid of media and new media and social media. They have taken positions that are different from the government position, which is a neutral position. Okay. But there is an opportunity for the Global South to take complete a stand on these issues.
In other words, there is need to ditch neutrality.
I think so.
Take me through that. Should we ditch neutrality on the Israel-Palestine conflict?
I think there's an opportunity.
I don't think we have been neutral. I've seen...
there is a difference, before you continue, there's a difference between government policy, official state policy, and then statements that are issued by government officials. And that could confuse us sometimes, because if the president, by virtue of the temperament on a day, speaks about something, there is a tendency to think that could be the official stand, which is not. Even if, for example, President Museveni woke up, or he could be speaking at an event, and directs, it still has to go back to aspects of the law. So that is where the confusion is. Should we ditch neutrality and state explicitly that this is where we stand on the Israel-Palestinian question?
For Uganda, I'm not sure for all other countries under NAM, but for Uganda, we have always had relations with Palestine and recognized their need to self-determination.
That is right.
Actually, it's a strong principle in non-alignment that all countries of the world, all states need to have the right to self-determination, which is the principle right that Israel is denying the Palestinians. So Uganda has always had that stand. I was only identifying that because I found it odd. President Museveni was hosting Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu here and other Israeli delegates, and he was referring to that land as Palestine. And he referred to that land
consistently in his speech. Yeah, I remember that controversy. You know, but that presents a dilemma. If, for example, the rest of the other countries have their own concerns about neutrality and the two-state solution for Israel and Palestine, where will the common ground be?
I think it is up to the people who are in the discussion tables in NAM to sincerely come up with a position.
South Africa
that can
has already showed us what it wants.
Absolutely,
it has the power to leverage.
It's up to them to come up with a solution that is in the best interest of the populations in the Global South. Of course, with in the context of the right of the Palestinians to self-determination.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, the other aspect that is bound to make a fodder for deliberations at the NAM and the G77 summit is debt. Debt distress is an existential threat for African countries right now, and many are grappling with inability to service or even pay back. What should be the new way forward? Is it a change of the global financial structure to allow for heavily indebted nations to be let off the hook so that they can reorganize? Or it's a case of we, as heavily indebted nations, coming to the realization that we must act? How should this be dealt with? Let me start with you very briefly as we enter the final bend of our discussion.
So, first of all, for the G77, actually even for the NAM summit, China has been a very great partner for Uganda and for NAM. It has given us vehicles to assist us, but in the G77, it's called G77 plus China because the G77 countries consider China to be a member, but China has not pronounced itself a member. Yet it cooperates with the G77 and it aids us with financial contributions to make sure the movement moves forward and supports our position at the United Nations. So for debt, I realize that one of the ways that we can survive in the global south and transform is through financing from China, especially for our infrastructure projects. And the West has been peddling this lie, America and their allies, that the Chinese are into the business of what they call debt trap diplomacy, that they give you a lot of money you can't pay back, then they grab your airport. They made those claims at Entebbe for Entebbe airport. Now we are all happy that NAM is coming here and the airport has gotten a facelift. It has not been taken by Chinese. The story was a lie. So you find that the biggest contributor in the G20s to alleviating the debt problem for poor countries has been China, and I think since it's part of the G77, it's going to be a great partner for us to make sure that we pay our debts, but that also we don't suffocate under them.
All right, Alex, relatedly, China over the last 3 years has appeared to close the taps on the amount of money it dishes out to African countries in terms of debt or development aid. I don't know what is informing that, because after 2010 there was a flurry of financial activity and there was money available. All of a sudden money has turned out to have a lot more conditions on it, and China was primed for not putting a lot of conditions on its money. What has changed?
Number one, you know that some debt is a political tool in terms of the international relations, international sphere, international trade. Debt is a political tool. Even that money that we get from China, it is not free. It's not good money. It's not with. It will never be with good intentions. It will be used for other. It will potentially be used for other ulterior political strategic meetings. Having said that, of course, China, unlike the West, is a shrewd businessman. Because debt is a business in economic sense. It's a business. Apart from being a political tool in the international sphere, it's also a business. If you are putting too much money into somebody whom you think does not have the capacity to pay back,
you've got to think twice.
You've got to think of how to restructure your relationship with them, and I think that's what realistically they are doing. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe I'm right.
No, I can see it's logical. If you realize that perhaps the payment regime is not working for you, then you want to realign and turn to staff, or rather a framework that works for you. But it is the gist of the conferences. Non-alignment there will be some realigning of things, no doubt about that. Gentlemen, many thanks. Alex Atuhaire, international relations expert, and Nnanda Kizito Sseruwagi, a researcher at Development Watch Center. We are emboldened by your perspective on these matters. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prince.
And that will do it for the Kickstart. We shall be speaking matters still on now. The Executive Director at Kampala Capital City Authority, Dorothy Chisaka, is here, and she will be telling us how and where exactly our readiness areas are as a capital. Stay with us.